Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call Old Boss. So I'm a big Metal Gear fan, and I always sort of am reluctant to draw the things that I'm the biggest fan of because I feel like I'm just gonna screw it up from the get-go. I also feel like the things I like the most I can't really bring anything special to, so I usually don't tackle them. But my son is also a big fan of MGS5. Not any of the crazy violent stuff, mostly just capturing bears and stuff, but he is really kind of obsessed with Big Boss, so I wanted to show him what Old Boss looked like, Old Big Boss. So I started doing this, and as you can see right here, this is a pretty awesome example of completely losing your way and not knowing what you're doing. So here's a, in my opinion, shitty version of Big Boss. I was looking at some reference and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do with this character that's going to be special, how am I going to warp his face or put my own spin on it or whatever. So you can see that very first try it was just pathetic and boring and whatever. So then on the second try, which is this one, I actually take this one quite a bit further, but ultimately decide that this isn't the way I want to go either. What I really want to do is I wanted to sort of push some of the more curmudgeonly aspects and really make him old. You can see at one point I even do like a pretty strong riff on his like eyebrow furrow, like at the bridge of his nose. I try to make it really crazy and crinkly and stuff, just trying to find these opportunities to really push him. But you can see that, I mean, I'm not finding this character at all. I mean, yes, he might look, if I were to continue with it, might look like Big Boss, but he's got that sort of wild eye. Big Boss never really has a wildness to him. He's actually fairly calm sort of all the time, even when he was Naked Snake, even when he was whatever. So I'm just really missing the vibe here. So you can see I'm typing more. I wrote more right there because I'm not pushing it nearly enough. So I figure, okay, well, let's continue the rough process, get just a little bit more involved in it, and really try to crank up certain aspects of this. Maybe slightly stylize the mustache, put a lot of wrinkles underneath his cheekbones, like all this kind of stuff. It's pretty clear that this doesn't work either. Like you can see, I still have further in this video where you'll see me working this one up further, but you can see that I don't really have it here. So this is one of those weird moments when you're doing art where you're just struggling like crazy. It's something that should be fairly easy. For me, it's a headshot. I do a million headshots. It's a headshot of a popular character. I do that a lot. So this is the type of thing where I'm just really questioning myself basically as an artist, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong here. Now you can take this a few ways at that point. You can either say, well, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to come back to this later, or you can say I'm going to power through this, or you can say I'm going to look at some more reference and maybe use that as a way to try and inspire me to do some sort of different thing here. There's like a lot of different ways that you can try and tackle this. Now, because a lot of the art that I do on iPad Pro is done in these sort of like random spurts, I decided to power through it, but then of course had to put it down here or there to, you know, talk to my kid or chase after a kid, or maybe do just something completely unrelated to finishing this piece. And so even though I technically powered through, there was probably a couple of breaks involved in this. I definitely didn't work on anything else when I was trying to nail this character down because I had to beat it. I had to win on this. So you can see here I start deciding, well, maybe I'll kind of do like the Kefka piece, and I'll go in and I'll do some really tight inks and some really heavy blacks, and that's the way that I'm gonna solve this. And while there might be some merit in continuing down this way, and there could be some people watching this video that think that there are aspects of this that are worth salvaging, I just wasn't feeling it. So you see I take it further, and I get to this point where I've really worked up like that furrow there, completely anatomically crazy, but just for fun, trying to really do that. And then I start working in the eyebrow, and I start doing a couple of other things, but eventually you'll see that I finally recognize that I'm not going to save this. I'm not feeling this, and I'm not going to save this. And sometimes that's just what you have to admit when you're in the middle of the creative process. Now, I work on this quite a bit more, so you'll see it go a little bit further. But what I end up deciding is that I'm not going to let Big Boss win. I'm just gonna let this version of it win, so to speak, and I'm gonna bail on it and work on a completely different take. So here I'm adjusting the eye, and I'm doing a couple of things here that's kind of fun, but now I'm starting to project sort of down the line, like, do I really want to color this? Do I really want to do I really want to keep inking this? Do I want to take these inks all the way to, do I want to do the ear? Do I want to do the neck? So I'm starting to evaluate like whether or not this is really going right for me. And I think in a lot of ways you can see some positives here, but you can see that it just doesn't have any punch to it. It doesn't have anything special to it. Well, at least I think that. Maybe somebody else doesn't think that, but I think that hopefully everybody who's watching can agree that the version I ended up going with was superior to this, at least in more ways than not. So on this version, I'm not doing the ink anymore. I've gone back to the fat pencil, but I'm just trying to do a super clean line using the fat pencil. So you can see on the eye patch specifically where that comes into play. You might not have necessarily noticed that on the smaller lines and stuff. But this is me when I go back to something like the fat pencil after trying the pen. That's sort of like an admission of this isn't working, and I need to get to a tool that I'm a little bit more comfortable with, that I can manage while I'm trying to produce this. And that's sort of the first sign that I'm going to be switching away from it in a second. So we're about to get to the switch. So this is you can see here, this has some cool stuff to it, but it's just not working. So I end up scrapping it. Now here I am now saying, okay, let's get to some more interesting shapes. Let's really play with this. Let's elongate him. Let's go for something that's going to be just more fun to do. And that's where this comes in. But then I'm also thinking, maybe if we just sort of pull back a little bit and we get to a little bit more of a shoulders up thing, there'll be some more fun stuff for me to look at as well. So while I'm sketching this and just sort of trying to get these rough shapes, you can see right here I take it and shrink it down because I decide that I'm going to go after more of the body. So that's what we got here now, right? And I'm looking at a ton of reference. I'm trying to make sure that for the most part I get this right. Big Boss has a very specific coat, a very specific collar, just a general look and feel, so I want to make sure that I get that. So I'm also going, if you are familiar with the Metal Gear series, with a sort of pose and a look and a energy that's way more Metal Gear Big Boss. Way calmer. He's got the situation under control. He probably has some harsh things that he has to tell Solid Snake, and that's sort of much more in line with the character. So I did that really loose rough, but I wanted to make sure that I really knew where I was taking this. So now I'm doing sort of a secondary, more cleaned up rough here. This is just to really lay it out, make sure my shapes are where I want them to be, and then give myself a clean base in which I can then do tighter lines. I didn't feel I really needed to do that across the coat, but because the coat, even though it's specific, it has a lot of just big, broad shapes. The face was where all of this was going to really come in. So here's me doing the tightest lines that this piece gets using the fat pencil, which is linked down below. I referenced the fat pencil. Something I'm going to bring up right now, because while you guys sort of watch this get drawing, is a lot of people say, I followed your fat pencil video and mine doesn't look the same. Something that I can't make clear enough is I don't understand all of the factors that may or may not go into having the fat pencil behave the way it does for me. All I can do is lay out for you guys exactly what I use. So that's what I'm going to say right now is follow the fat pencil video, do exactly what's there, and then beyond that, what I do is I use an Apple Pencil on the iPad Pro 12.9 inch. Previously, it was the first generation 12.9 inch. Now it is the second generation 12.9 inch. And then my dimensions for my canvas, I almost always work at either 8 inches by 12 inches or 12 inches by 8 inches at 300 DPI. That is currently how I feel it's my best trade-off for quality versus layers in Procreate. We'll see what Procreate does in the next version regarding layers, and whether or not, with all of the new advancements of the iPad Pro 2, if they can give us more layers or do something like that, although stability, in my opinion, is sort of better right now. That is sort of what I've decided on as being the thing that works out the best for me. So if when you're using the fat pencil, you're getting something that doesn't look like what I have, those are the other factors. So Apple Pencil, iPad Pro, 12.9 inch, 8 inches by 12 inches, 300 DPI, or 12 inches by 8 inches, 300 DPI. If you're not getting the same look, so to speak, as I am, and you're following all of that, I just seriously don't know what to tell you at all. In fact, when I got my new iPad Pro, I didn't even transfer over my brushes. I just went in and did the exact same tweaks that I had done before. So I know for a fact that with my setup, it's the same. So good luck trying to get that set up. I also recommend you don't necessarily have to do the exact same thing I do. You could also just build your own thing that feels comfortable. For instance, in the next piece that you're going to see, the next video, I actually altered the fat pencil and I reduced the grain on it because I was working at a much smaller, higher detail level, and I wanted some of that grain gone. So that's a situation where the fat pencil doesn't solve all my problems, and I had to go in and tweak some things. So anyways, that's the last thing I'll say on the fat pencil and how it works for me. Follow all those steps, and if it still doesn't work out for you, I don't know what to say. If you don't follow all those steps, then it could be one of those steps that's making it different for you. So now here we are, continuing the tightening of the lines, getting his suave haircut going. There's not a whole lot to say on some of these sections. I'm basically just giving him the outfit that he has. There's a lot of sort of smaller details that I may or may not leave out, although like I said, his coat is comprised of a bunch of broad shapes. I try to put in some of the stitching because that's relatively prominent in MGS4, which is what's going on right here, stitching. And I tried to just sort of, put it where I thought it made sense. I might not get all of the stitching and all of the patterning perfectly correct, but I felt like it at least captured the gist of Big Boss's coat. I called this piece Old Boss, even though I'm pretty sure he's never truly referred to as Old Boss anywhere, as like, for instance, one of his aliases. He is technically always Big Boss by the time you get to MGS4, but since in that game Snake is Old Snake because he's aged so rapidly, and Big Boss has been Big Boss in the past, now we're at the stage where we've got MGS5 and MGS3 and all of the in-betweens, where he goes by Big Boss every now and then. I thought that it was just sort of a nice distinction to call this one Old Boss, since I also did a Big Boss one before. So if you go through my previous videos and my other pieces, I do a MGS5 era Big Boss, you could say, wink wink. So I wanted to separate these two pretty distinctly by saying that this is Old Boss. This is Big Boss when he's old at the end of his life. And so there's the completed lines. You can see the light roughs are still in the background. I just left that on because it looks nicer and you can sort of get a reference point there. I turned them off though, and now we move into the coloring stages. So I just started by applying a master flat, which is what I call just sort of that big basic shape. I did it this time by outlining the entire thing and then doing a fill in the middle, and then I sort of cleaned up some spots, and then I selected the lines and then filled where the lines are also into the master flat. That way the flat goes all the way to the edge of the lines. When you have a pencil-y line, it's not the cleanest, but it helps. And when you do like a super clean ink line and you're doing, say, an ink line that absorbs the colors underneath, that also helps quite a bit. You can also see that on these lines I went with a yellow set to multiply, which I normally don't do. That's because I'm going to make an effort to capture the palette from MGS4. So you can see the shadow that I'm using here. You saw it flip on there for like a quick second. Is also like a gross yellow because I'm trying to go for that palette. So that's a gross light yellow set to multiply. I didn't speak about the flatting process because the flatting process is super straightforward. Now here's where we get into something a little bit complicated because I want to make sure that I'm able to shadow this in a very precise way, but I need to keep adding new layers of the multiply to the piece. So if you do that, you're going to get multiply over multiply on multiple layers, and you're going to get too much shadow where you don't want it. So what I have to do at this point is I have to start working in this look where everything is going to be shadow. The raw color is what I have to basically be staring at now in order to get this to look right. If I were doing this in Photoshop, I would just do all of these layers in one big master folder that's set to multiply, and then I don't have to worry about it. But it doesn't really work like that. You can't do layer settings or whatever in Procreate for a folder. So this is what it looked like. You can see all of those layers right there. That's what it looked like as I was working on it. And if all those were set to multiply, you'd get all this cross multiplying going on. So now after I've got all of that complete, which is what I'm continuing to do here, let's finish off the process, finish off the shadowing. I set the whole thing to multiply again, and that's what gets us this. So I merge all those layers together when they were still that one color, and then I set that new completely merged layer to multiply. And so when I'm going in and doing like this beard and all of this stuff, this is easy because I can do my select paint, select clear methodology, and that's fine because of the way the layer stack is. But when I was doing that big broad flat that was the coat, that's why I decided to go with that other way. So now here's a new layer that's introduced, which is the exact same color set to multiply, just to get some darker spots in amongst the shadow, which is what's going on with his collar and all of that. And now I'm trying to figure out what's the style I want to go for the shine on his hair. That's ultimately where I end up with the look for that. And the next section is going to be the background. So what I actually did was I took a photo from a little festival at the market near my house here in Hamburg, and I just switch it to black and white. It's going to go by pretty quickly, but I basically just bring a photo in and I switch it to black and white. I keep saying this because that's what the thumbnail looks like. There we go. And so now I'm doing just a bunch of crazy shifts and color layers and all that stuff, and I know that went by really fast. Good news is in this video I'm going to do a Procreate file breakdown at the end so that you can see what that was. Now I'm doing the bounce light coming from the other side because his main light is coming from the left, sort of the left back behind him, and now we're doing the bounce light, and this one is white. And then eventually what I'll do is I'll add another color underneath it to support it. After I've got this, it's not going to be this stark when everything is said and done. It's going to be reduced in opacity. So we're adding in the glint. A lot of stuff is going by really fast here. So the glint, the rim light, or the bounce light, I guess you could say. And then there we've got the bounce light catching onto the other side of the collar, and we're putting the shadow in around his head. And now a bunch of other layer stuff just happened there, and the way Procreate records stuff, it goes by pretty quickly, but you'll see it in the Procreate file breakdown at the end. Here I'm adding some hot spots in the background, trying to capture the look and feel of MGS4, and now here I'm doing a bunch of layer adjustments to try and get all of these colors to be exactly what I need them to be to look like that, basically. Here we're doing a bit of that saturation, the transition from shadow to light, adding in some extra bloom in the background, adding in subsurface scattering on the ear where that light's coming through, and a lot of stuff just happened there. So let's get into the actual Procreate file breakdown so you can see what it all was. I had a little bit of a recording snafu when I was trying to do the screen recording. I did the entire thing and then it didn't actually capture the audio. So I'm going to try to quickly narrate what I had originally said in this video and try to sort of keep up with the visuals on screen. But what this is I'm going to go through the actual Procreate file and see if we can sort of shed some light on the way the file is set up. So let's get started. So first, here's the lines. This is the way it was at the very beginning of the video. You can see that sits, you can see in the layer stack right there where that sits, and it got very quickly changed over to color lines. So you can see right there in the stack, we've got those colored lines that are just called lines, and we've got blurred. What you saw in the video is how I sort of went for part of the look that I was going for. we've got two major folders here. We've got the flats folder and the lighting folder. So if we turn on the flats, here's what you see as far as the flats go. It's fairly basic. This is a fairly basic image. If we actually sort of dive in here, you can see that the base layer was the skin tone, which you saw as it was getting built in the video. Then we have the blush lips, socket, 5.0, and veins in that stack, which as I'm toggling here, you can see sort of how all of those play. The darkness of the lip, they're actually not that dark because at the end, the way it sort of all gets like tweaked, but you know, that's what they're there for though, to add some color. The 5.0 is there because technically he would have some 5 o'clock shadow because his beard probably wouldn't grow like that, but then it also adds to give some depth, so that's why that's in there. Next up here, we've got the coat. We've got a couple of the other layers here. You can see that the way the stack went, the shirt and the jacket and the tie all sit on top of the coat layer, just because that seemed like it was the easiest way for me to go about it as I was building it. And there's the rest of the stack right there. I got that eyelash layer in there because I've always wanted to support the eyelash a little bit so that you can really draw attention to the eye. There's the darkened eyebrow. All that really is to bring a little bit more emphasis to the eye. So that's basically the flats layer, or excuse me, the flats folder. It's, like I said, fairly simple. And now we move into the background and how that's set up. So we've got that background color back there, which is that sort of gross yellow orangey color. And then the photo layers that you saw in the video that got layered on are right there. One's a little bit more blurred than the other. One is set to multiply, one is set to add, just desperately trying to capture the look from MGS4. And then you see we've got a color layer on top of that that's adjusting it, and then that bloom layer that I added just to sort of put those little hot spots that sort of appear in the backgrounds from the game. The next thing we're going to move into is the lighting folder. This is the most dramatic folder as far as altering the overall look of everything. You can see there's what, 8, 9, 10, like roughly 10 layers in there. And so first we turn on the shadows. This is the first shadow layer. You can see where that sits. And then there's the second shadow layer that's just sort of bringing some more intense local shadows around like the collar and under the chin and stuff like that. I then have the saturation layer, which is the layer that sort of where the transitions from shadow to the high value, making that a little bit more saturated to give it a little bit of a stylized look. That really pops up when you're doing skin because of subsurface scattering and radiosity and stuff, but I just sort of did it blanketly across the entire thing. We've got this bounce light, which is just white. It's a white layer. You can see there it is adjusted to 100%, and now we'll turn it back down to where it was at for the piece. And then I had that duplicated with a color underneath it set to overlay, which is what you see there. So that's how we get the look for that bounce. It's those two together, those two layers together. So there's the hair shine and the skin shine, which those are pretty straightforward. Those are just add layers set to white. And then the subsurface scattering on the ear is also an add layer, but that's a orange, so you can see all of that sort of adding up. And then the orangification layer, which is right there, you see me turning it all the way up so that you can see that is what it looks like when it's its most intense, just trying to bring in some of the color from it, the scene into it, and then sort of turning that back down to the level that I actually want it at. So you can see me toggling it right there. You can see the differences between them. So that's the flats and the lighting layer. You can see when I turn off the lighting layer how much of an impact that has. That is without it and then with it. Pretty dramatic that those 10 layers that are in there give it that much of a change across the entire figure. So after that, there's an arm darken in the bottom left just because I really kind of messed up the way it looked down there and it was driving me crazy, so I just sort of darkened it real quick in the bottom left. And then here's the first blurred layer and then the second blurred layer. Both of those are set to multiply, but one of them is slightly turned down just so that it isn't as heavy as it could be. And those blurred lines are the same as the main line, don't forget. So it's the same color and everything. We're just bringing more darkness by adding so many of them. There's the flyaways layer for the flyaway hairs on his head. That was just sort of painted separately on top of everything else. And then the darken layer, this is a light brown that's just applied to the bottom so that I'm bringing attention to the top by darkening the bottom. It's like a vignette technique. There's the glint from the eye, which is on top of everything so that it can be just bright and sharp. And then that gets duplicated and slightly blurred so that we can get that bloom on it, which it might not be the best to see in this video, but when you view the image at high res, you can definitely see it. Now we have this color adjust layer, which you can see me toggling there, that's just sort of giving a little bit of a change to the entire thing so that we can try and harmonize the character with his environment even more. That's what it looks like when it's fully cranked up, and then where I have it actually set for the final thing. Then we have a skin bloom layer, which I'm about to turn on. So what this thing does is I basically took just the highs from the skin, and you can see here it's set to add, it's white, and then I just turn it up or turn it down based on how bright I want. The MGS4 is pretty bloomy because it was in that era when they were really trying to capture certain films, and they were going for just that really bloomed out look, and so that's what I'm going for there, trying to match the screenshot of Big Boss at the end of MGS4. There's a duplicate of that where it's just the extra bloom from it, the actual glowy part of the bloom. So here I'm moving it around so you can see what part that is. Pretty weird looking there. And then this is what I just named the high bloom, which is taking all the highs from the entire piece now and putting them back in and blurring it and then lowering the opacity. So there it is, fully cranked up and then down to where I have it. So obviously if you really crank it up, you can go for some really moody atmospherics, but again, I was trying to make sure that it was still a little bit of my style and a little bit of what MGS4 is trying to do. And then there's the signature. And then here I'm going to group it all and turn it on and off so you can see what that difference looks like. I'm just basically taking all those extra adjustment layers that are on there. They're not true adjustment layers like in Photoshop, but there you go. You can see by turning those on and off how much that also adds to trying to capture it. So here's now lighting off, lighting on, and then that bonus set of layers on. And then lastly, I'm going to take the entire image, duplicate it, adjust its levels to be a little bit more intense, but then I'm going to adjust the opacity of that. So there it is at 100%. It's fairly high contrast, and I didn't want to lose all those mid values. So then I take that layer and I turn it down a certain amount so that I'm getting sort of a certain amount of the original image and a certain amount of the adjusted. So I hope that gives you some good insight into the way the actual Procreate file is set up. And I hope it gives you some ideas as to how you might want to build your files and build your layer stacks, and maybe share sort of how you're doing it if there's some sort of cool thing you've learned. There you have it. That's the lines as they were as I started to color them for Old Boss. And then there's the final piece. This one was a ton of fun actually, because I love the Metal Gear series. If you know me, I'm pretty hardcore about it, and this was really fun to do. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or any of the other videos, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you all at the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are all the places you can find me.